Hello, my friends. Life presents us with situations where we are faced with the actions of others that can evoke strong emotions. One such experience is humiliation, when someone attempts to degrade or embarrass us in front of others. In these moments, our first instinct may be to react impulsively, to defend ourselves, or to strike back. Yet in the teachings of Stoicism, we are reminded that we do not control the actions of others, but we have the power to control how we respond. Control what you can. In every moment of life, we are confronted with circumstances that seem beyond our control. The actions of others, the challenges that arise, the unpredictable nature of the world. All of these are external events that we cannot dictate. The Stoics, however, taught us a simple but powerful lesson. We cannot control what happens to us, but we can always control how we respond. This distinction lies at the core of their philosophy. The Stoic approach to life does not demand that we suppress or deny our emotions. It acknowledges that feelings like anger, fear, or frustration are natural. However, the key is in recognizing that while we may experience these emotions, we are not at their mercy. We do not need to allow them to dictate our actions or our state of mind. The only true power we have in this world is the power to choose how we respond to external events. When faced with adversity, it's easy to feel powerless, as though we are at the mercy of forces beyond our control. The weather, the economy, the behavior of others, all these are things that happen to us, and we often feel helpless in the face of them. But Stoicism teaches us that we are never powerless. We may not be able to control what happens to us, but we always have the ability to control how we perceive and respond to those events. It is in this realm of control that our true freedom lies. For example, consider a moment when someone insults you, or when you are passed over for a promotion at work, or when things do not go as planned. These are external events that can trigger a range of emotions. But the Stoic does not react impulsively to these situations. Instead, they step back and ask themselves, what is within my control here? The situation itself may be outside our influence, but how we choose to interpret it, how we choose to act in response, and how we maintain our peace of mind are entirely within our control. In any difficult situation, we must remind ourselves that our perceptions of the event, our judgments and our reactions are the only things we can truly govern. The external world will continue to unfold as it will, but we are the ones who decide how we engage with it. This is where our power lies. By focusing on controlling our internal state, our thoughts, our attitudes, and our responses, we begin to free ourselves from the tyranny of external circumstances. The Stoics believed that we should practice constant self-awareness and self-discipline. This is not about suppressing emotions, but about becoming conscious of them, understanding their root causes, and choosing whether or not to act upon them. By cultivating this level of awareness, we gain the ability to act with wisdom and clarity instead of reacting out of impulse or emotion. When we focus on controlling what we can, our thoughts, our emotions, and our actions, we stop giving our power away to external forces. We realize that the world will continue to present challenges, obstacles, and setbacks, but these do not have to define us. It is how we face these challenges, how we choose to respond to them, that shapes our character and our life experience. In every moment, ask yourself, what is within my control? And in that space of awareness, choose wisely. Whether it's a moment of conflict, a personal setback, or a fleeting emotion, remember that the power to maintain peace, clarity, and virtue always resides within you. By embracing this principle of focusing on what we can control, we begin to navigate life with grace, resilience, and wisdom. Humiliation, like all external events, is something that arises outside of us. It is not a part of our inherent nature, nor does it reflect our true selves. When we are humiliated, we are faced with an experience that seeks to disturb our peace, to rattle our sense of self-worth, and to place us at the mercy of another's judgment. However, it is essential to recognize that humiliation, much like any other external circumstance, is not inherently tied to our identity. It is a fleeting event, a momentary occurrence that holds no power over us unless we grant it that power. The Stoic perspective teaches us that we must separate ourselves from the external world. That is, we must view things that happen to us, whether positive or negative, as events that occur outside of our true being. Humiliation is one such event. It is an action that originates outside our control, often from the behavior or words of others. But it is not the event itself that defines us. It is how we choose to perceive it, how we choose to respond to it, that shapes who we are. When someone humiliates us, the natural tendency is to internalize their words or actions, as though they were a reflection of our worth. We may feel small, ashamed, or less than, believing that the humiliation has diminished us in some way. But this is where Stoic wisdom steps in. The truth is, their words or actions are simply that. Words and actions that come from another person, another mind. They do not define us. They are external events, occurring in the world around us, and they hold no more inherent meaning than we assign to them. The Stoics emphasize the power of perspective. Humiliation is a reflection of how we view the event, not the event itself. If we see humiliation as a personal attack, as something that tarnishes our identity or worth, we are giving power to an external event to define us. But if we choose to see it as an external occurrence, as a moment that does not touch the core of who we are, we retain our power and sense of self. The actions of others may seek to embarrass us, but they can only humiliate us if we allow them to. In viewing humiliation as an external event, we free ourselves from the tyranny of others' opinions. The Stoics teach us that we cannot control the actions or words of others. We cannot control how they perceive us or what they may say. What we can control, however, is how we allow those actions to affect us. We must remember that we are not at the mercy of another's judgment. Humiliation, like any external event, is just that. It is outside of us, and thus it cannot define us unless we grant it that power. Moreover, when we see humiliation for what it truly is, an external event, we realize that it is transient. It will pass. The sting we feel in the moment is temporary, and its power dissipates the more we detach from it. In this detachment we find freedom. We stop identifying with the event and instead we identify with our inner resilience, our ability to remain unaffected by external disturbances. Humiliation may arrive uninvited, but it does not have to stay longer than we choose to allow it. The practice of seeing humiliation as external also reminds us to detach from the need for approval or validation from others. Often we internalize humiliation because we seek approval or acceptance from the crowd. We desire to be seen in a certain light, to be admired or respected by those around us. But when we view humiliation as an external event, we detach from this need for external validation. We recognize that our worth does not come from the opinions of others, but from within, from our character, our actions, and our ability to stay true to our values. In the end, viewing humiliation as an external event allows us to return to our center. It helps us remember that the opinions of others do not have the power to determine our worth, and that no external occurrence can touch the essence of who we truly are. It is not the humiliation that matters, but our response to it. And in choosing to see it as an event outside ourselves, we empower ourselves to remain grounded in our own truth. Emotional resilience is not something we are born with, but rather a quality we cultivate through intention and practice. It is the ability to face life's challenges, whether they are moments of humiliation, loss, failure, or adversity, with a steady mind, maintaining our inner peace regardless of the storm surrounding us. The Stoics teach us that our emotional responses to external events are within our control. It is not the events themselves that disturb us, but our judgments of them. Thus, emotional resilience is about developing the strength to remain grounded, to face hardship without allowing it to overpower our sense of self. In the face of humiliation, for example, emotional resilience means not allowing ourselves to be swept away by the initial surge of shame, anger, or embarrassment. These emotions are natural, and they arise within us as an instinctive reaction to external circumstances. However, the Stoic perspective reminds us that we are not merely passive recipients of our feelings. We have the ability to observe these emotions, to understand their nature, and to decide how we wish to respond to them. Emotional resilience begins with self-awareness. To be resilient, we must first acknowledge our emotions without judgment or suppression. We may feel anger or sadness when humiliated, but instead of acting out of those emotions, we take a moment to reflect. We can ask ourselves, why do I feel this way? Is it because I have attached too much importance to the opinions of others? Have I allowed their judgment to disrupt my inner peace? Through this process of inquiry, we create the space necessary to gain control over our emotional reactions. The Stoics taught us that our emotions are often driven by our judgments of external events. When someone humiliates us, for example, it is not their words that cause us distress, but the meaning we assign to them. We may tell ourselves that their insult is a reflection of our inadequacy, or that it somehow diminishes our worth. But this is a judgment, not a fact. By practicing emotional resilience, we learn to separate the event itself from our interpretation of it. We acknowledge that we cannot control what others say or do, but we can control how we choose to interpret their actions. This awareness creates the emotional space needed for resilience to take root. One of the key aspects of emotional resilience is detachment. Detachment does not mean indifference or coldness. It means the ability to step back from a situation and view it objectively. When we detach from the immediate emotional reaction, we can see the event as it truly is, an external occurrence that has no power over us unless we allow it. The person who humiliates us may have their reasons for doing so, but that does not make it an inherent truth about us. Through detachment, we can choose to maintain our dignity, to remain grounded in our own sense of worth, despite the external judgment. Emotional resilience is also about the ability to endure discomfort without reacting impulsively. Often in moments of humiliation, our instinct is to defend ourselves, to strike back or to retreat in shame. But emotional resilience teaches us to pause. We take a deep breath, gather our thoughts, and choose how to respond with intention. This does not mean suppressing our emotions, but rather choosing a measured response instead of an impulsive reaction. In doing so, we preserve our inner peace and our ability to act in accordance with our values. Another important element of emotional resilience is self-compassion. When faced with humiliation or hardship, it is easy to be hard on ourselves, to think we are somehow less deserving or incapable. But the Stoics remind us that we are all human, and part of being human is the experience of pain, failure, and growth. In practicing emotional resilience, we acknowledge our vulnerability without judgment. We allow ourselves to feel the pain, but we do not allow that pain to define us. We treat ourselves with kindness and patience, knowing that this moment will pass, and that it is simply another step on the journey of life. Resilience also requires the cultivation of perspective. Emotional resilience is not about avoiding pain, but about finding the wisdom in pain, the lessons in adversity, and the strength in vulnerability. To practice emotional resilience is to choose growth over suffering, wisdom over impulse, and peace over chaos. It is the ability to look at life's difficulties not as enemies to be defeated, but as teachers to be embraced. Through this practice, we become more than our reactions. We become masters of our inner world, choosing to meet life's challenges with grace, patience, and clarity. In a world that often places heavy emphasis on external validation, the Stoic wisdom offers us a valuable perspective. True worth is not found in the opinions of others, but in the cultivation of virtue. We are constantly surrounded by the judgments, praise, and criticism of those around us, and it is easy to fall into the trap of measuring our worth based on what others think. Whether in the form of admiration or disdain, external opinions can shape the way we see ourselves, and we may become overly concerned with how we are perceived. But Stoicism teaches us that this is a false measure of value. Our true measure lies not in what others think of us, but in how we live our lives according to virtue. The Stoics believed that virtue, living in alignment with wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance, was the only true good. Wealth, fame, or social status, no matter how highly regarded by others, are external circumstances that do not define our character or our essence. These are fleeting, temporary things, and they depend entirely on the judgments and perceptions of others. But virtue is constant and internal. It is something we possess regardless of the opinions of the world around us. When we focus on virtue, we begin to detach from the need for approval. In fact, the Stoics warn us that the pursuit of external validation can lead us astray. If we are constantly seeking to please others or to align our actions with their expectations, we lose sight of our own moral compass. We become slaves to the whims and judgments of others, and our peace of mind becomes contingent on their approval. But when we focus solely on cultivating virtue, we are no longer beholden to the judgments of the crowd. Our actions are guided by a higher purpose, and our worth is rooted in something far deeper than fleeting opinions. Think for a moment about the nature of external opinions. They are often inconsistent, subjective, and fleeting. One day we may receive praise, the next day criticism. One person may admire our actions while another may condemn them. In seeking approval from others, we place ourselves at the mercy of their ever-changing opinions. But when we focus on virtue, we transcend this instability. The wise person does not base their actions on the shifting tides of external praise or condemnation. They act in accordance with their values, regardless of how they are perceived. This is the essence of Stoic integrity. When faced with humiliation or judgment from others, it becomes even more important to remember that their opinion is external and transient. The Stoic response is not to internalize this opinion, but to evaluate it through the lens of virtue. If their criticism is unjust, it holds no true weight. If it is valid, it becomes an opportunity for self-improvement, not an assault on our character. Either way, we do not let their judgment dictate our sense of self-worth or our actions. Instead, we turn inward and ask ourselves, am I living in accordance with virtue? The answer to that question is the only one that truly matters. Moreover, when we focus on virtue rather than the opinions of others, we begin to cultivate a sense of self-respect that is independent of external circumstances. We stop defining ourselves based on how we are seen by others and instead define ourselves by how we live our lives. This shift in perspective is liberating. It frees us from the constant anxiety of needing to meet the expectations of others, and it allows us to find contentment in simply doing what is right. No external recognition is necessary when our actions are guided by a commitment to virtue. The Stoics also remind us that seeking external validation is a form of dependency. When we base our worth on the approval of others, we become vulnerable to their judgment. We are at their mercy, subject to their whims and biases. But when we focus on virtue, we are no longer dependent on others' opinions. We become self-reliant, finding strength and peace in our own actions, independent of external praise or criticism. In the pursuit of virtue, we are guided by the understanding that the opinions of others are often misguided, incomplete, and fleeting. People may not always understand the reasons behind our actions or the values that guide them, and even if they do, their understanding may still be colored by their own biases and limitations. But virtue, being rooted in wisdom, is clear and universal. It transcends opinion and judgment. By focusing on virtue, we ground ourselves in what is lasting and true, rather than what is temporary and subject to change. To focus on virtue is to act with purpose, guided by principles that are timeless and unshaken by external events. It is to let go of the need for approval and to embrace the deeper satisfaction of living a life aligned with the highest good. In every moment, in every interaction, we are called to ask ourselves, is this an action I can be proud of regardless of what others think? When we answer that question with honesty, we become free from the tyranny of external opinion and firmly anchored in the enduring strength of virtue. In conclusion, the path to mastering emotional resilience and responding to humiliation lies in our ability to focus on what truly matters, our inner virtue, our personal integrity, and our ability to control our reactions. By viewing external events like humiliation as temporary and beyond our control, we detach ourselves from their power to define us. Through emotional resilience, we acknowledge our feelings without being ruled by them, choosing deliberate, thoughtful responses over impulsive reactions. Focusing on virtue allows us to shift our attention from external approval to internal alignment with our highest values. By cultivating a life grounded in wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance, we free ourselves from the constant fluctuations of others' opinions. Ultimately, the strength to remain grounded and at peace amidst life's challenges comes from within. When we focus on our virtues and cultivate resilience, we embody true freedom and unshakable self-worth.